Hello, boys and girls. Mr. Royans here. And today I'm coming at you with another lesson on setting. Now, if you remember, setting is where and when a story takes place. And it is important to you. It's important to me that you be able to understand what a setting is, because the setting affects the plot of a story. Now, plot is all the events that happens in a story. But did you know that where the story takes place affects how the story unfolds? The setting of the story isn't just as important as any character in the story. And in yesterday's lesson, we looked at location, we looked at time, we looked at props. Now remember, props are just objects within the story that the characters maybe interact with, right? But today I want to add another element to our lesson, and it's going to be senses. And what do I mean by senses? Well, what are our five senses? We smell, we hear, we taste, we touch, we see, hear, touch, taste, see, hear, touch, taste, smell. Just the five. I think there was a sixth one that I was reading about that I was like, oh, I never thought about that. So when you're reading, what of your five senses do the words speak to? What can you feel? What words make you feel? What words make you smell? What words make you see? What words appeal to those senses to help bring the environment to life? And we're going to do that. We're going to look at these, the skill, applying these to the skill through the lens of Freak the Mighty again. Because it's a text we're all familiar with, well, most of us should be. And the environment is described in such an interesting way that it uses all of these things to bring the environment to life, particularly in this scene. And the setting changes throughout this book, as I've discussed. But one of the most important pieces is the setting at the end of the book, where Max is kidnapped by his dad, Killer Kane, and Killer Kane takes him to this abandoned warehouse, or in my head I picture an abandoned warehouse. They never explicitly say an abandoned warehouse, do they? So what we're going to do is I'm going to read, and I'm going to do an I do for most of it, and then we'll do a we do, but you're going to watch me as I think about the setting, as I put together all these. Ooh, let me get my reading and thinking voice signs. As you can see, I'm going to use my reading voice. I'm going to go to my thinking voice to identify these pieces of setting. So on the other side of the alley is this boarded up building. It used to be a part of the Testaments until a fire burned it out, and my father decides we'll hide there until Iggy gets a car for us. All right, so reading voice, thinking voice. What does this place look like that they're going? Well, I see boarded up. And that's going to be a prop. But I see boarded up. Where's that? I said boarded up building, sorry. Boarded up building. What does the phrase boarded up building conjure up in your head? Have you ever driven by a house and seen it boarded up? Or have you seen a boarded up building? And then he says, until a fire burned it out. Well, that's going to be another prop, right? Fire burned it out. What does fire do to something? It wrecks it, right? Makes it all charred and black. So I'm instantly thinking of a building burned out. I know it was burned out. I see black around, boarded up windows. He reaches out and pulls off a big piece of plywood with one hand. The screechy noise the nails make sounds like a cat fight. And the next thing, there's a real cat, a black one that leaps out from behind the plywood. My father jumps so hard he yanks me to the ground and I bump my head. Well, once again, more props. He reaches out and pulls off a big piece of plywood with one hand. Big piece of plywood. So the boarded up building, pulling off the plywood. But then, I want to start dipping into the senses. I'm going to use purple to underline that. Because I'm thinking that screechy sound the noise makes. Have you ever been working on doing some construction with somebody in your family? You know, maybe some housework with a dad or a grandpa or a mom. And the screechy noise when they get a hammer and they pull a nail out, that really appeals to the senses. Because like pulling a nail out of the wood. Ooh. So I can stop there and I can think, oh boy, he is at a building that's boarded. It's a boarded up building. I see the props of the boarded up windows and buildings. I know a fire burned it out, so it's not going to be very nice. It's got plywood that we see Killer Kane comes up and pulls out with one hand. And the screechy noise that the screechy noise the nails make sounds like a cat fight. And I really like that simile. Remember, simile comparing two unlike things using like or as. Screechy noise of the nails, it's like a cat fight. Two unlike things, but you get the idea, like a cat fight. Right? Okay, we're not done there. There's more to this part of the story. So, Killer Kane's going on. Can I not scroll down? Oh, hold on, guys. I'm going to have to go to my laptop and scroll. Get in there, he says, and then he's pulling me through this old burned out window, and we're inside the building. Well, I know you heard me say burned out building, and you are thinking of the location, right? Or the props of a burned out window. So that means it's going to be all black and grimy. And then we get to this next sentence, or this next paragraph, and it really, really sets up the setting for us, the location. Everything is black and wet and dripping except for where snow has come down through holes in the roof. Most of the inside walls are gone, and you can see where the center beam was chewed by the fire. All the old pipes and wires are hanging down, and everywhere underfoot is broken glass, the color of smoke. Whew. Wow, that's a good description of that setting. And I'm going to start using my thinking voice, and I'm going to think about what all this combination of words means. Everything is black and wet and dripping, except for where snow has come down through the holes in the roof. And I'm going to use time here to represent a couple different things. Snow, that's going to tell me time of year, right? The time of year, there's snow, so it's got to be winter time. And remember, in the lesson yesterday, they were talking about 4th of July, a hot summer. So this story takes place over a long period of time, right? Over 6 months or so. Snow has come down through holes in the roof. So that's telling me time of year. But what about senses, this new piece of the puzzle that I've put up here for setting? Everything is black and wet and dripping. That's seeing, that's sight. You see that it's black. Everything is black and wet, and you feel that it's wet. You look, you can see that it's dark and it's wet. You can see that I am in the process of recording. Sorry. Sorry about that, guys. Little interruption there. No worries. That was just Mrs. Mast. So everything is black and white and dripping, except for the snow has come down through holes in the roof. Now, we think about props here, and we think about most of the inside walls are gone. So inside walls are gone. It's a burned out building. That's Mrs. Mast again. I have windows in the back of the room. She was making faces at me. Most of the inside walls are gone. Okay. Props again. Inside walls are gone. You can see where the center beam, you can see, actually that should be senses, huh? You can see, that word see, that's definitely an indicator of sight or a sense, right? Where the center beam was chewed by fire. How can something be chewed by fire? What does that mean? If something is chewed by fire, that means that it was, wrecked by a fire, right? So there's a center beam that's probably all burned up and nasty. And all the old pipes and wires, that's props, guys. All the old pipes and wires are hanging down, and everywhere underfoot, broken glass, color of smoke. So, senses, you see the senses, color of smoke, you see the color, but the props of broken glass, so there's shattered glass, wires and pipes hanging down from this building that's been ravaged by fire. A building ravaged by fire. Okay? And then, now, we're going to go on. He says, he finds a place where the stairs go down into the basement. He pulls away the boards and planks. You should feel right at home, he says, because he's likening it to the down under where Max cooped up like you were in that cellar hole. It's so dark. Sorry. Erase that. It's so dark, he has to use a cigarette lighter. And the flame is so puny, you still can't see to the bottom of the stairs. You go first, he says. We can't have both of us on the same step. It might break. The steps are made of thick wood, but slick and punky soft where the water has been dripping all these years, and I can feel how it sags under my feet. There's a rail that's hard to grab with my hands tied, and the way he's holding up the lighter, you might as well keep your his eyes shut. So, thinking voice, it's so dark he has to use a cigarette lighter. That's senses, guys. It's so dark he has to use a cigarette lighter. Imagine somebody with a lighter, it's so dark, you still can't even see. It's so dark he has to light it. You still can't see to the bottom of the stairs. How dark is that building, right? And you go first, he says. We can't have both of us on the same step, it might break. The steps are made of thick wood. There's props. Right? Because it's some steps made of pretty thick wood. But slick and punky soft where the water has been dripping all these years. And you can feel, that word feel, that's a sense, right? It's feel. I can feel how it sags under my feet.
You still live in Hannah Schmidt's on 1100.
Sorry, announcement there. I can feel how it sags under my feet. There's a rail that's hard to grab with my hands tied. The way he's holding up the lighter, you might as well keep your eyes shut. So it's so dark in these stairs that just barely hold the weight of these two guys. And then I slip and start to fall. And then he's pulling back on the rope, and I'm hanging there in the middle of the air with my feet skittering, and he's easy does it, boy. We'll take this one step at a time. And finally, we get to the bottom, and there's a little slant of light coming through this narrow cellar window, enough so we can feel our way all around all the burned junk that has fallen through the floor. And this is going to be senses, because look, there's a little slant of light coming through the narrow cellar window. So imagine if you've ever been down in a basement with that lights on, and there's just the one basement window that light comes through. That's the senses. You're seeing that. And then you get to, he ties my feet back up and loops the rope tighter on this old busted up boiler that's tipped over so I can't move or see what's behind me. And that's just props. An old busted up boiler that's been tipped over. So you think of an old rusted boiler that's tipped over, he's been tied up to. And then this is the last part, guys. It says, I can barely make out that narrow window. Hardly big enough so a cat could slip through, and under it is this big pile of coal slagged up against the foundation wall. Overhead, there's creaking with the weight of him moving around, trying to be light on his feet. I'm listening to him up there and trying to see out that little window when something moves against the light. Pretty sure there's a scratching sound coming from the window, except you can't always believe what you hear in the dark. Then whatever it is goes away, and I'm thinking it was probably a cat or maybe a dog sniffing around. Finally, I just keep still, because the more I move, the tighter the rope gets. I can barely make out that narrow window. Then we have a prop. You can see the narrow window. Hardly big enough so a cat could slip through it. Okay. And under is a big pile of coal slagged up against the foundation. So there's this window. There's coal going up underneath it. Overhead, there's creaking with the weight of him moving around. That word creaking, like stepping on it. And then he even says the senses. I'm listening to him up there. Listening. So he's listening to the creaking above him. Trying to see out that little window when something moves against the light. So he sees something move against the light. I'm pretty sure there's a scratching sound, so he hears the scratching sound. So it's painting this picture of Max stuck, tied to a boiler, down low. He sees a cellar window. Something's making noises. His dad's creaking around upstairs. It's just, it really just paints a picture of where this young man has been taken to by his father. All right, guys? So, senses, that's what we've added. You use location, you look for where, what do they talk about the location? The time of day, time of year, the props, what kind of things are in the scene that is being described? And then the senses. How do you use your senses to, how are senses described? How are senses being used to explain the setting, where the story is taking place? Like we just went over there. All right, guys?